Welcome to the Millennial and a Boomer Walk into a Coffee Bar podcast.
The very best podcast to get your life advice in the form of a grande caramel macchiato in a venti cup, 1/3 whole milk, 1/3 almond milk, 1/3 soy milk, double the amount of vanilla syrup, caramel wall in the cup, no caramel drizzle on top, upside down, of course, tall ice cup, whipped cream, rounded lid, one shot extra espresso, decaf, cinnamon sprinkled on the top, and for the name, that's David, spelled Dafydd, please.
Or to get your business, finance, and life support black coffee advice, I'm Dan, I'm a Boomer.
And I'm Chase, the Millennial. Thanks for joining us today. All right, we're back and talking about money.
Money. There's been some good songs over the years about money.
Well, lay a couple on us.
Money. Yeah.
Is that where the beginning and the end?
That's it.
All right, if you're listening and you have a better money song, throw it in the comments.
There you go.
Yeah, throw it in the comments.
We should solicit people to give us feedback and comments. I was going to say we should solicit people to send us their money, but that's not what we're all about. We're about advice for the millennials.
Unless you're someone who wants to sponsor the podcast, then we're wide open. I do want to give a quick update. We had another comment on Apple Podcasts, and I wanted to read it so that people know that A, we love getting feedback, and B, that people understand that this is the greatest way you can help us by liking, commenting, and reviewing the podcast. So this one is titled Great Engaging Podcast, and it's by Mommy Nature. She says, such a fun concept. A boomer and a millennial team up to provide both ends of the working and relationship experience and share their wisdom with one another. And luckily, the listener, us. They have a charming dynamic that's fun to listen to as well as great tips. They engage you to feel like you're sitting right there with them. Highly recommend.
Wow, I like that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mama. I appreciate that very much. So if you're going to continue to be a one-time listener, make it a full-time listener if you can do. No, we do appreciate that. And we have a good time doing it, but there's some information that we're relaying that will help millennials and boomers understand each other. And I think that's the whole goal of the podcast. So.
Yeah. So as we get ready to launch into our episode today, I want to remind those of you who maybe this is your first time tuning in, go back to the previous two episodes. The previous two were the three, it all started with the article, the 3 mistakes your boomer parents make that are keeping you in debt. And we talked about that. And then the second one was understanding financial proficiency, really just some good basic, how do I learn about money?
What's it all about?
And now we're going to get into the nuts and the bolts of it, right? We're going to change from theory and discussion to application, which I think is really important and a difference from what I think a lot of people talk about on podcasts where they just talk about the theory or the ideas. No, we're going to get to some practical application pieces around the budget today.
Yeah, up until now it was been, here's all the concepts, here's woe is you that you're got debt, you do that. Now is the time for boomers and millennials to cut to the chase and start to do something about it. And the very first thing is let's talk budget. Now, it's interesting because, simply put, a budget is how much money you have, how much money you need to spend on different things, and how much money you save or use for other goals. How much do I have, how much do I spend, and what concept do I have to do to save it? All
right, so if you're an audio listener, podcasts like this are great. But before we jump into the specifics, let's give some, maybe I'm I want to read it, listener. I think that there's 2 people that I would recommend. I know one of 2 you will also appreciate. The other one maybe not so much. But if you need help with the foundational pieces, Dave Ramsey's Baby Step Plan it's a really good way to get some of the simple pieces understood. Whether you follow it word for word or not, that's a different thing, but that's a great place. But the one that we both agree on, Larry Burkett. Old school.
Old school. And well, Dave Ramsey's not a spring chicken either, you know what I mean? They both come from boomers. So I will challenge you, because I do like both of those resources, and they're pretty straightforward and pretty easy to understand. Educate yourself. Listen to some of these things. Search it out on the internet. But I would ask you, do you have, or can you find, a millennial that would actually be in a good position to teach finance? And I'll say that because a lot of times people are not about to say, "No, I'll listen to Dave Ramsey," or "I'll listen to Larry Burkett." That's another one of those, "I'm a millennial and I'm not going to take advice from a boomer." That's old school. Let's get someone in the current, because those two you gave are brilliant, right? They really are, for a basic understanding. But let's try to get someone back in that can accommodate your language.
All right, so I'm going to switch now, because that was for the boomers who like to read a book. For the millennials who want to watch them talk live, there's a couple of great people. The first one I'll recommend is a lady named Rose Hahn. And she has a YouTube channel. I want to say it's called Investing with Rose or something like that.
Yeah.
But she gets into, in her early videos, she sticks with the basics. And then she's on episode 200 or whatever now.
Oh,
now she's into some of the more technical pieces. I would encourage you, as a millennial wanting a millennial perspective, go back to the early stuff and get the foundations and specifically around investing from Rose Hahn. Investing with Rose, I think, is her channel. And then there's another one, and maybe I don't agree with everything Rose says or everything the next guy says, but actually, let me pull it up. This one is really interesting. His name is Graham Stephen. He's a 30-year-old real estate agent and investor who started working right at turning 18. And he has some really interesting... Now listen, I'm not saying all of what he says is right, but it's at least going to get you to start thinking about investing in a different way. So there's two that you could dive into right away. Rachel Cruz, I mentioned her on the previous one, a millennial who is fantastic on budgeting specifically, and she turns the theory into application. She does a ton of shorts on Instagram. She does whatever they're called on Instagram or YouTube, or whatever. She does a lot of these short things. So you want 30 seconds on budget? Man, great person to go follow.
Well, and do it. Go out and search these out. There is all kinds of information available. In fact, what you need to do is to be able to get educated enough to make smart decisions with your money and avoid problems with your money, like overspending, debt, or forbid running out of money. It's always difficult when you're underwater on money and you're juggling this and juggling that. There's things you can do about it, and a budget specifically can help. So search it out with a bunch of these other millennials, boomers, Gen Z. There's plenty of information out there, but you need to be able to get educated to make your own decisions, and it's not rocket science.
Well, I think the big question then is why? Why do I need to do all this? Well, money is a resource and it can be limited.
Yeah.
I can tell you right now, there's a lot of things I'd like to go out and buy, but I don't have enough money right now. I think there's some things you could talk about to get more money. That's on owning your own career, a previous episode we've done, and some of the things around that.
Yeah.
But you don't have to wait for the better career to start this process. In fact, I would say you won't be successful with more money until you're successful with the money you have right now, which may feel like not enough, but until you can figure out how to utilize the money that you have today in an efficient and proper manner, you're never going to get more money.
Let me make a point that you kind of touched on. There's two things here. There's wants and there's needs. And needs are pretty straightforward. You know, you need to have food, you need to have shelter over your head, and you need to stay dressed. And I know some millennials don't believe that you need to stay dressed, but we're hoping to turn that around as well. You need to have those type of things. Now, you want to have a current iPhone, you want to have a really cool car, you want to have the latest gadget, but you don't need it. So if you can differentiate that and those differences in your budgeting process, that becomes very, very important. And I was going to say complementing to your budget and the ability to budget and save money.
Let me give you a perfect example of this. So I was recently changing our cell phone plan to a new carrier. And through this process, I was also adding a third line. We've got a kiddo who's 12 and close to a teenager. He now is in the youth group at church. He has hockey practice. He's got things now where we're not with him. And so I am not a proponent of kids having a phone. I think there's a lot of research out there, which we should probably talk about that again in the future. But there are times when I want to be able to get a hold of my son or have him have the ability to get a hold of me if there's an emergency while he's away from us. So I was adding a third line. Now, I wasn't going to add a big fancy iPhone. He doesn't need that. He needs the ability to phone call and text. That was it. That was my only 2 requirements. And the guy that I was talking with said, well, I've got just the phone for you, a flip phone.
Woohoo! Yes! Flip phones are coming back, and I totally agree. A flip phone, that's what, I didn't grow up on flip phones. Jeez, I was in my 40s before flip phones were invented. But yes, you're making a wise decision there for him.
So that's not even the funny part of this whole story. I told the guy, I said, that's the phone I want. And he goes, great, that's going to add $2.13 more to your bill every month. And I said, I don't want that. I'll just pay for the phone. And he's a boomer. And he looked at me and he goes, I've never had anyone just pay for the phone before. I said, well, how long have you been doing this? 2 years. 2 years? You've never had anyone pay for a phone?
Everybody is financing.
They're financing their flip phones for $2.13 a month. I'm like, bro.
For 25 years.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not a flip phone.
Yeah. My goodness.
So that's a great example right there. I think that's almost a need.
Yeah.
It's not a want. You don't want your son to go on the internet. You don't want him to spend time and checking hockey scores and doing all that. It's a need to be able to, hey, Mom and Dad, I'm done. Can you come pick me up?
Yeah.
But even that little thought there, it's probably saved you a lot of money. And I don't know what a flip phone costs, but it's not anything like the latest current iPhone.
I think when I paid cash for it, I think it was like $72. Yeah. I mean, not much.
And people will pay, $2.50 for 5 years.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, anyway, well, that's good because you need to be able to budget your money, and I guess what you need to do is prioritize. That's where you're going with this thing, mm-hmm. and what you're doing. So, everybody has wants and needs, but even in the wants, there's prioritization that's required. That's pretty high on the point in time right now with your son and having that communication ability.
Yeah, I'll say something a little controversial maybe though. I would say a cell phone for someone who is not using it to work, that's not a need. It's a great want. It is something that's super impactful, and if you have the ability, you probably should have that. But man, in my lifetime, we didn't have cell phones. That's not a need to get through life. And I think there's probably a lot of research, which we'll dig into, I'm sure, at some point, that says cell phones, by and large, are hurting people more than they're helping.
Yeah. I was at the airport yesterday, flying home from my vacation, and I stopped and I looked at the people around me, and out of, I would guess there's probably 300 people in the gate, there were 2 people that were like this on their cell phones. I was one of them, and this other guy, he didn't look like he could figure out his cell phone. Just saying.
Yeah.
But I tell you, we're dumbing down America, and it's a time waster, or it's a waste of time for most of us.
Yeah.
Now I like a cell phone to make phone calls. I really do. But anyway, we need to prioritize the expenses that we choose, and we need to know the difference between wants and needs.
All right, so let's where the rubber meets the road. Let's start with some common budgeting terms and their definitions. Yeah. All right, let's start with income. Income is money you earn or receive from any of a different type of source. This could be an allowance, it could be a gift, or it could be from your job. But it's money that's coming to you. That's income.
Right. And a lot of people don't take the full spectrum of income as income. It could be the interest you get paid on your CD. It could be the interest you get paid on your passbook savings account. It could be, hey, I mowed the lawn. Hey, I turned in, and this was big in my life. My mom used to drop me off with a gunny sack, and I'd walk along the side of the road collecting aluminum cans. I walked many a miles and got many a pounds of aluminum can, money from those type of sources. So make sure that your income is not just your job, but it could be dividends that are paid to you and things like that. So all sources and different sources will provide your income.
All right, then lay on us, what is an expense?
It's money you spend. Income is just that. Expenses are things that you pay out. Now, there's several things we've talked about, but food, clothes, bills, entertainment, things like that are the expenses or the outgoing of the money. So now you know what's coming in from all sources and you know what's going out.
All right, and both of those numbers are needed in order to create a budget.
Correct.
A budget is what shows you how much money you have and where it is going to go every month. The problem is when most people set up a budget, it's rear facing. They, at the end of the month, put all of their expenses into their budget to see where their money went. That's an incorrect view of a budget. A budget is something you do before you start swiping, and it tells you forward thinking, here's how much I can spend in these different areas.
Right. But the big thing is to put it all together under a current state. What am I doing today? Because that will be the bones of your budget. And let's talk about the time. I have a salary that I make X number of dollars a year. Well, I can't budget for a year. And you don't want to budget for a day. But where you really have a pretty good idea is a monthly budget. A lot of your house payment is due monthly, your car payment is due monthly, your phone, your water bill, things like that. That's monthly. Should that be a good term for you? Don't forget to start bringing that down to a daily basis. Hey, am I going to have coffee today or not? But when you're budgeting, the period of time is reasonable, about a month.
About a month. And this is, here's what I think a lot of people, maybe I'm wrong on this, you tell me. I think a lot of people look at a budget and say, it's so constricting. I don't like it because it tells me what I can or cannot do. But I think that's probably the incorrect view. Like that's how most people immediately, if I've never lived with a budget, now I'm being constricted by this budget. But the truth is, it is a fence, but it's not keeping you in, it's keeping all the bad out.
Yeah.
And it's actually a protection, not a constriction.
You know, I read this story about a schoolyard, a school ground, and they actually were saying, let's see, what do we want to do, and let's put a fence around the schoolyard. Well, actually, they did a study, and the kids seemed to be restricted more when there was no fence around the schoolyard, and they played in a certain proximity close to the school. And so then they went and they put a fence around the entire schoolyard, and it opened up the entire available playground for doing, and that's exactly what you had just stated in a budget.
So I would like to dive in. I've got 5 things. We'll just run through them because we're running out of time. But there are 5 areas, not in the notes. This is a freebie again. 5 areas that are valuable insights on setting up a budget. And you can find these types of ideas from Dave Ramsey or Larry Burkett or whoever you're looking at. But the first is to start with a zero-based budget. Zero-based, which means when you're done budgeting, there should be no dollars left unbudgeted.
Yeah.
There shouldn't be a penny left unbudgeted. Every dollar has to go somewhere. You get to decide where that goes. That's the first. It should equal 0. to prevent you from overspending or underspending or neglecting or necessary expenses, all these things, right? Everything's got a place to go. The second is what we've already talked about, prioritizing those needs over wants. It's important to figure out housing, utilities, food before what finance nerds call discretionary spending. I call it my coffee budget, right? But it's money that here we go. Hey, there you go. It's stuff that you don't need but you want. And you have to have a budget item that allows for some flexible spending in there. Right. All right, number 3, allocating funds for saving and I would say and giving. And giving. We're going to get into this a little bit more in the future. We've talked about saving a little bit, but I would say most people that talk about finances look at saving and giving in equal footing.
I don't think they do, but I think they should. So I like your point.
The two that we reference definitely do. I think there's a lot of other people who probably don't.
Okay.
That's a better way to say it. All right, the next I made a joke of 2 episodes ago, using the envelope system. Now, you don't need envelopes. You don't have to have cash on hand, but the idea behind it, which means if there's money in that envelope or in that budget item, you can spend it. And you shouldn't feel bad about spending it on that item that it's budgeted towards, because you've already set it aside for that reason. So it actually is a very freeing feeling because now I can go spend it on that. It's already budgeted for it.
It's already there.
All right. And we can dig into the envelope system deeper if we need to. If you have questions, comment below and we can go deeper into the envelope idea. And then 5th and finally, review and adjust your budget regularly. I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all budget for every person to use, but I would also argue there's not a one-size-fits-all budget for you to use because life changes, right, and your budget has to change with that. And I could give you a great example. When you have a kid, your budget changes dramatically. Dramatically, because now all your discretionary coffee money is buying diapers.
Oh yeah, I could make a comment about that, but I'll resist because it's a family budget. A family show. So, but let me kind of, just as we kind of wrap this up too. We got income. That's what comes in from many sources. We got expenses. That's what goes out. We got a budget to see. That's going to be like a pair of binoculars or a telescope. It's going to be a magnifying glass, and you're going to be able to see where that goes. And I agree, you need to cycle back every month. But I do want to make sure that we understand the goals of budgeting. What do you want to do, or what do you have to do with your money, like saving for a house, a car, college fund, or vacation? And I put a couple of things in the notes about this, and there's other things that you need to budget for. And one of the things is Christmas, right? My wife and I have always started in July or earlier and saying, we got Christmas that's coming up. We would start a budget fund for Christmas because a lot of people are here's my monthly expenses. They don't save for something that would be in December when they're buying budget. You should never, ever go in debt don't ever go in debt to buy me a present. I'm just telling you that right now. That's the most ridiculous thing. My gift should be something that you don't have to spend to go into debt for that. So do that. Also,
I gotta cut in here. It always makes me laugh when people are like, oh, Christmas, I'm so in debt after buying all the presents. Did Christmas date change? Is it not December? It comes on the same day every year. You can pre-plan for that.
Exactly. And so start in July. And if you spend more than that, start in January. But that's one thing. So these are the things that a budget's going to help. And also I got one here, date night. If you want to have a date night, then make that budget, because it's not really a must-have. It's a want-to-have. But usually you just don't think, you're a spur of the moment, let's go out. No, take your spouse on a date night, but budget for that. And don't go into debt for that. So debt is money you owe someone else. The bank, the store, a friend, a parent. Bad debt, it can cost you more money in interest and fees, damage your credit score, or cause stress and conflict with friends and family when you get yourself into bad debt. But as we talked about, there's also some good debt. What is some good debt? I've got a big question mark by that one, because what is good debt?
Well, that's a loaded question. We're Christian, and the Bible says, "Owe no man anything." It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
So the question is, where are good places that debt could live? I think of, first and foremost, house debt. House debt is debt, but is it an investing debt or a depreciating debt? And it could be both.
Yeah.
Depending on which house you're purchasing, it could be either one. So is all house debt good? No, I would argue not all house debt is good. But if you have an appreciating house or a house that's getting better over time, it's probably really good debt. Because when you go to sell it, you'll sell it for more than you bought it for.
Right. Let me say this about that. Your house is your biggest investment of all time. Even in a down market, you should maintain it. You should improve on it. You should not let it deteriorate to the point. It's your biggest investment in living, in saving, in hopefully investing. And so take care of your house. That's a good debt, I think. But you can also have debt that's controlled and planned. In other words, borrow money that you have a plan to pay back. And let me say this, I've been waiting to say this, and I know we're going long here, but when I was in college, my freshman year, my dad pulled me aside and said, "Hey, you need to get a credit card." And I'm like, I don't want a credit card, that's a problem. And he said, "No, you need to get a credit card and you need to charge on that credit card." And I thought, what are you talking about? Yeah, baby, let's go. And there was a local store that offered a student credit card with a very low balance on it or outcome. And what they wanted you to do was to spend on the credit card and then that month pay it off and spend on you need to develop the good habits of a credit card to help your credit score. And we'll talk about that in future things too. It's not a bad idea. Now, I never went into debt because I always did it, but it showed that I could be trusted with money that was out there that I could pay back, and it helped to develop my credit that allowed me to have better interest rates, better opportunities for use of credit.
And we're going to do an entire episode on debt in the future, and I'm going to push back on that. I think that credit scores are not as important as they once were. And I think there's a lot of millennials who are questioning the credit scam. But we'll just leave it at that, and we'll come back. So make sure to tune in. So there's debt, bad debt, good debt. But where we land on that, understanding those, is your budget has to prioritize your spending. It has to then reduce debt. And it should eliminate your knee-jerk spending.
Right.
Or another way to say that is avoid borrowing because you knee-jerk spent on the latest Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle memorabilia. Cowabunga, dude.
Spoken like a true millennial. So
yeah.
No, and that's it. The budget is the first step to getting your financial acumen, good word, financial acumen set. And it will improve your current life dramatically, as well as your future life. So.
All right, so now our listeners are there. They're hooked. They know they need a budget. Next episode, next week, we're going to talk about starting a budget. Where do I begin, and what do I do first? So we're looking forward to having you back with us. And remember, just because it's different
doesn't mean it's wrong.